Whatever next, Unplugged. Conversations about making transformation more human, more honest, and more likely to stick. And here's our next episode with Dean and Teresa from CWC Consulting. Hey, morning, Dean. Morning, Teresa. Welcome to Whatever Next Unplugged. This is the podcast where we talk about making transformation more human and more honest. And I'm delighted to have both of you on the podcast today to hear your background, your experiences, and why you're so passionate about changing the way we do transformations across the globe and within organizations. So hi, Dean. Hi, Teresa.
Good morning, Lisa. Good to be here.
Good morning, Lisa.
I always like to start with introductions. I could introduce you, but it's so much better if you introduce yourself. So, Teresa, could you just introduce yourself, a bit of background, and how you find yourself here in the podcast?
Yes, of course. Thank you, Lisa. So my name is Teresa Holema, and I'm originally from the U.S. I have been in Europe more than 25 years. And actually, I came to Europe to work on an implementation of an ERP package. So this is back when Y2K was the big topic. So I started my life in Europe, let's say, working on IT projects, big IT projects. And soon thereafter, I was also working on another IT project, which is a SOP project. And that's where I met Dean. So I started with a business background, finance. I was the client. I was working on these big internal projects. And so what was always interesting to me was, how do we work together? How do we collaborate? How do we get this done? What was also very interesting to me was cultural diversity, because I was working on multicultural projects and I was just curious, because sometimes I saw that it worked very well and sometimes I saw that it was a frustration. So my career went in the direction of cultural diversity. I became a trainer and consultant. I also focused on team dynamics, and I focused on working virtually and brought all that together, supporting global teams. And I wrote a book called Virtual Teams Across Cultures. Now, where that's interesting is I'm interested in what happens to us when cultural diversity and geographic distance, how does it impact how we think, feel, and act when we're working together? And that curiosity about what happens to us, actually, I'm also bringing now into my current work that I'm doing with Dean, which is what happens to us when we're in these transformation projects, these IT transformation projects in business. What do we feel? What do we think? How do we respond? What do we resist? And so with that curiosity, this is what brings me to this podcast with you today.
Brilliant. There's so much there. I mean, ERP transformations, many of our listeners would be involved in those. And as you say, the cultural diversity, the global transformations that are now happening, and also virtual working, Teresa. So look, great you're here. Dean, tell me a bit more about your background.
Indeed. Thank you, Lisa. My name is Dean Bannigan. I'm a management consultant and enterprise architect. Interestingly, my background started in reporting and analytics and multidimensional databases, supporting organizations to prepare their budgets and forecasts. And I moved through reporting analytics to data management, data architecture, big data, yes, of course, and more latterly, using big data to support AI. And so, although very much a technical background per se, what really fascinated me though was, what are the drivers, what are the motivations for people in technology, both the recipients of, and the providers of the technology. What is it that caused them to embrace the technology, to reject the technology in some instances? And so that led to me doing a psychology degree. And then subsequently a master's in psychology, which you don't normally associate with technologists per se. But what it did for me was, it didn't make me less technical. Okay, what it did was actually made me a better consultant, because it caused me to ask questions about what underpinned decisions, both from a business perspective and from a technology perspective. More latterly, as an enterprise architect, I've been supporting organizations to develop and design their business-driven technology strategy. So the target architecture, integration of platforms, the roadmap towards those the target architecture itself. However, in doing so, my observation has been that more often than not, those transformation programs hardly ever achieve their objectives, or if they do, it's a fraction of what their original intent was. And it made me ask the question, why? Why is there such a gap between strategic intent and operational delivery. And more, it really felt as if the individuals who are required to both adopt the transformation and those who are required to execute it, somehow there was a disconnect. And that led us to CWC and this conversation today.
Brilliant. I mean, again, so much there that I can relate to. I mean, I think when we first caught up, I said I've been in the data and MI space, the enterprise architecture space, definitely. I've never taken the step to go and do a psychology degree or a master's. I wish I had, because I really agree with you that the psychology and human side of transformation is often lacking in transformation programs. There's significant amount of money invested in ERP platforms, in big transformational change, in adopting AI, and a lot of focus is put on the technical skills and the technical integrity. But when it comes to change and people and humans, it does feel like we need to inject something more into it. And that's why, I was so pleased when you picked up the old-fashioned phone to me, Dean, and said, come on, let's talk. I've got CWC Consulting that I'm setting up. It's on a mission to make a difference. I'm interested in your perspective. So tell me more about the mission behind CWC. And maybe, Dean, you can start, and maybe then Teresa follow on.
Yes, of course. Yeah. So CWC stands for courage, wisdom, and compassion. Okay. And the way that I see this is that it takes courage to ask those uncomfortable questions. Yes, those difficult questions. More often than not, when we go into an organization and we're embarking on a transformation program, not everybody buys into it immediately, because the first question is, what's the impact on me? Yes, do I need to learn a new skill? Am I going to even lose my job? Something else. And what impacts does it have on me within work and outside of work? And if those questions aren't addressed up front, yes, you've got a challenge on your hands, essentially. So courage really means asking those questions that will surface those concerns up front. Yes. Wisdom, well, it's the wisdom to leverage our experience, yes, to bring to bear our experience. But more importantly, is to bring to bear the wisdom that actually exists within the organization already. Very often, the people who really know where the skeletons are buried, something else, aren't the ones engaged up front. Okay. So how do we ensure that wisdom, those insights, those experiences are actually surfaced up front? Okay. And compassion. Compassion is to realize we're all humans in this space. And with all the idiosyncrasies, the anxieties, the concerns, and the aspirations that goes with being human. And I think it's really important.
And Teresa, would you add to that?
Yes. So I'd like to just add, CWC is also interested in this. What are the human dynamics that lead towards transformational failure in transformation programs? Like I said before, I'm very interested in this. What happens to us? What happens to us from how we think, feel, act, our psychology when we are placed into this situation where transformation has to happen. We have to do something new. We have to be something new. Well, wait a minute. What's the resistance that comes up? So how do I feel about this? How can I voice my concern? What do people do with my concerns? What am I excited about? What do I want to get connected with other people as I'm going through this? So transformation is a big deal. It's not just a project plan and let's just hope for the best and give some programs and some processes and hope the technology works. No, there's a lot of human element involved in this. And so I'm interested and passionate and connected with Dean to support humans as we go through this process so that they can be their best, but also so that they can also learn from this process as well and grow through this process. So we're looking at a way that just hasn't been getting enough attention, because we've just seen that people are focusing on the processes and they find the human element too hard. So we just hope that communication is enough, and it's wholly inadequate.
And I think from the conversations I've had with the two of you, the offer for CWC seems to be very much about putting a more intentional change wrapper around a transformation program, getting people in a room, engaging with the people, establishing what they think, feel, say, and do, and really getting to the heart of the team, the community, and the enterprise with where the transformation is heading. And what does that intentional change wrapper really mean on the ground when you're working with your clients and you're in those sessions? How are you injecting this intentional human side of change into their transformation programs?
Good question.
A lot of it starts with listening. So often we see on these programs, there's a lot of telling I communicated, that should be enough. But in fact, the listening plays a huge element as well. Preparing the leadership team is a big element because the leadership team is actually quite operational driven in the way that they are working together and collaborating. But a transformation program is quite different it requires something different of them in how they interact with each other and how they interact with the organization. Preparing middle managers because they play a key role and linking strategy with operations. And so supporting them through this process. Often they don't get enough support. So it's customized support, but it's very much about figuring out what's going on, figuring out what people need, and particularly looking at the culture, the assumptions, the stories, and checking if they're actually right for the future, if they're right for where the organization wants to go in this transformation. Dean.
Yeah. I think it's perhaps as good to talk about what we don't do, okay, as well as what we
Interesting.
do. Often leadership are very clear about the vision, okay, of the transformation program and the intent. And as I mentioned earlier on, there's an inherent assumption that everybody gets it. Once they've got it, everybody must get it. Of course, well, yes. But the challenge is somehow that by the time it lands operationally, okay, it's been diluted or it's been misunderstood. And often those who are asked to adopt and adapt to these new ways of working don't feel a part of it. And they feel as if they've been done to rather than being part of the doing. And they don't actually recognize themselves in the vision of the transformation. So what we're about is really ensuring that there is collaboration and participation across the piece, from your C-suite to your middle managers to your operational individuals. And how do we do that? Teresa's touched on one or two aspects of our approach, but essentially it's about surfacing their excitement. So what excites them about the possibility, but also what concerns them, yes, about the trajectory that we're proposing, and ensuring that they are actually heard. There's a quote that I often use, which is that if you knew the options available to me, you might better understand the decisions I make. So if you give people visibility of why, yes, you've arrived where you are, okay, and why you're getting where you want to be, okay, they're more likely to engage, especially if they see themselves in that. So those are some of the principles I think that we use.
And who across a transformation team tends to be your sponsors or your champions, or who are advocating for these services and recognizing that these services maybe aren't a wrapper in their program already?
Okay, so we were talking about this very recently, actually. So the CIO, budget holder, often the visionary, something else, very much one who's responsible for the technology strategy, okay, that's supporting the business vision. So without a doubt, the CIO. But closer to the ground, I would say the program managers, the transformation leads, who are experiencing the day-to-day impact of the transformation, the challenges that are coming to come to the surface. It's an interesting question because we've asked ourselves, why is it individuals who are long in the tooth have been, they've led numerous transformation programs historically, and yet somehow they still defer to process and to the technology, you know. And the conclusion that we coined a phrase, the certainty illusion, which is that process and technology appear to be more certain. You push a button, something works. You initiate a process, you get an output. And so we're sort of led to this idea that process and technology are more certain. The reality, of course, is that when people are involved, certainty goes out the window because as I mentioned before, we surface all our idiosyncrasies, like the anxieties, the aspirations, the desires, etc., and the current concern. Our sponsors are often those who can see where those challenges are, who have experienced that certainty illusion. Yes. But it's also really important that our proposition, okay, is real world, i.e., by addressing those concerns, we are still addressing, adoption, time to market, cost reduction, all those real world objectives of transformation.
I think you're absolutely spot on. I think what got me so passionate into looking at the human side of transformation is when you look at how many transformations actually fail. And you're right to say we all seem to go through the revolving door into the office and we suddenly turn into following a process, as you said, following documented templates, providing reports, going into monthly meetings, giving highlight updates. And for some reason, we suddenly stop being human and start following the process. And what I love about what you're sharing here about CWC is you're trying to nudge all of us. I say nudge, you're probably thinking you're going to be shaking all of us. You actually say, look, you're humans. You know, this is about a human organization that wants to make a difference. And yes, we have to follow processes. Yes, we have to do the highlight reports. Yes, we're bringing in technical tooling and we're standardizing, automating, introducing AI, which would be common terminology. But if we don't get that human bit right, with honesty, I totally believe that transformation is never going to hit the business case outcomes that organizations need. So I'm pretty certain there must be many people out there listening that would see the opportunity and just don't know how to fill it. How have you seen these practices, principles, ways of working being embedded in transformational programs and making a difference?
Before I answer that, Lisa, I'd just like to comment on what you just said regarding we've all been in transformation programs that fail. Because what's interesting on the few that I have been involved with is what happens when transformation programs fail is that people are now, or the leaders or whomever, are blaming the people for the failure, actually. We had resistance, people aren't buying into the change. They didn't get enough training. They're disengaged. They didn't listen to our communication, etc. So what's interesting is that we have this illusion that the processes and the technology will be enough. And then when we don't put attention to the people, they're the ones that we blame when the transformations fail. So then what can we do? Which is your next question, is how can we embed this into transformation programs so that we can make a difference and minimize this chance of failure? And the idea then is that it's not just a team building in the beginning, it's ongoing engagement with people, finding different ways to listen, finding different ways in which they can work together, ensuring that the leadership team is connected and ready for the transformation program, so giving them attention, certain coaching during the program, making sure that we have change agents who can be the connection between perhaps the IT organization or the business organization and sort of being change champions. So there's different touch points that we can have throughout the entire transformation program to ensure that the human element is listened to, that we can respond, that we're engaging with people, and that we're getting excited for what the future holds.
I think what you said there, touch points throughout the transformation program. And Dean, you mentioned earlier about the senior people often have the vision, have the narrative. One of the challenges with transformation is they tend to take time. They're not quick projects that start month 1, deliver month 3. You know, they tend to be multi-year, multi-region, multi-country, multicultural if you're looking at transformation on a global scale. And I think what you said is so important, that transformation teams realize this isn't something you do at the start with the big town hall and then do at the end as you're deploying the technology and then run the training, run the comms. That whole engagement has to be happening through multiple touch points, not for week 1, not for week 2, but for the entirety of the transformation. And maybe what you're sharing is the wrapper, the intention that you bring is that consistency of keeping that human wrapper engaged and involved throughout the transformation program, because it's not this month's challenge. It's a continuum. Sorry, Dean, Teresa was bouncing to you when I interrupted.
That's okay. I just wanted to address a point, which is transformation programs comprise a myriad of stakeholders, okay, but they roughly fall into two categories of business and technology. Yes, and there is there are things that we need to address, which often is rooted in perception. So they're often the perception by the business of technology is that they are gatekeepers or order takers, or they're technologists for technology's sake. Yeah. Perception from technology of business is that it's the Wild West. There's lack of governance. They're into creating shadow IT. And what we need to do, first of all, if we want to bring the humanity back into this, is to break down those perceptions. One of our clients, we ran what we called a collaboration day, where we brought business and IT stakeholders together to really listen to each other, to really hear each other. They and we were blown away by the humanity that came into that room, where they actually heard each other, not the perceptions they had, but the realities of actually engaging on a really human level. And it really transformed that relationship dynamic. And that's really important, that we're not working in these business and technology silos, but there is genuine collaboration across the piece. And that it has a real transformative nature when it comes to transformation programs.
I totally agree with that. And I think that collaboration is so important. And what you're also highlighting there is the light bulb moment that happens. We've come through the sliding doors or the revolving doors. We've arrived in the office. We're in our transformation teams. We're getting on with our processes. But then you come along, you run this collaboration workshop, and suddenly it's as if we wake up to the human side and think, oh, what's Dean thinking, feeling, saying and doing? What's Teresa thinking, feeling and saying, doing? What will the communities we're trying to impact really think about this thing? And it changes the mindset for everybody involved in the program, which I'm sure is so important. And I mean, we've been talking for the last 6 months probably about transformation, about how to reframe, rewire, reconnect transformation programs. And I'm so interested to see and hear more about how you progress with your clients, how you bring this intentional change wrapper to transformation, because more transformation programs should turn on the human and honest side of what they're doing. And I know it's challenging. I know it's an additional ask of a program team to consider the human side as well as the technical side. But I just think unless organizations do that, a lot of money is being spent on tech. The tech is going in, maybe not as well as expected, but the tech is going in, but we're not getting the most out of the tech. And there is something for any technical person. They do want to get the most out of the tech when it's implemented. There is nothing more disheartening than, spending months and months putting a technology platform in and then seeing the little impact it has on the organization, having been in all of the workshops and reported on the highlight reports. So it's always good talking to the two of you. You bring me hope that there are people out there that are going to make a difference to transformation programs. But is there anything else you'd like to end on in terms of what your hopes and dreams are for what you're doing with CWC, with your transformational clients?
So what is my hope? My hope is that there are people out there who are planning transformation programs or perhaps in the middle of them, and they're listening to the three of us and they're realizing, wait a minute, I'm stuck where I am, or I don't see that this is going to work. Deep in my heart, I know this is going to be a challenge the way we've set it up. What I'm missing or what we need to unlock the potential are more attention to the human. And that could be in conversations with Dean and I, or it could be reading your book, Lisa, which was really fantastic as far as understanding, being very practical and in the dynamics that happen on projects. So I hope somebody's out there that says, wait a minute, this could be better. I don't have to do what I've seen before, what I've experienced before, these failures. I don't have to just accept that this is the way it is. There is a new way of doing things. And that is giving attention to the people, because the people are on the project. They're part of it now, and they will be part of the future as well. Dean?
Yeah. God, the hope for the future is that that the human side of transformation program isn't simply a nice to have. It doesn't sit in that nice to have box, but becomes an intrinsic component of realizing the value of the transformation program itself. That achieving cost reduction, efficiencies, etc., isn't just process, isn't just technology. That actually, if you leverage the humanity of it, you're more likely to achieve those objectives. And I, just as a reflection on your whatever next book, Lisa, there are those five lenses. For me, are an ideal way of bringing the humanity back into that whole transformation experience. And just as an example, an opportunity for people to simply just reflect on why we're here, How did we get here? Yes. And it's a real opportunity for a reality check. Yes. And we're building that into some of our workshops, for example. And it gives people a space where they can truly become human again in the context of transformation, share those excitements, share those concerns, and have a place where they can be heard and take ownership of the transformation itself. That's the hope.
Brilliant. Well, honestly, if transformation programs were embracing the 5 lenses of the book, and if that was triggering people to have more courage, have more wisdom, and have more curiosity, then 2026 will be a good year for transformation. So, Teresa, Dean, thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Teresa.
Whatever Next Unplugged. Conversations about making transformation more human, more honest, and more likely to stick. Find out more at whatevernextbook.com.